So before we start, I just want to say thanks to our sponsors for making today possible. So my name is Grace, and I'm a web designer with Coldfront Labs, and this is actually my first Drupal camp, so I'm pretty excited to be here. And thank you. And today I'll be telling you guys about designing with Penpot. But before I even get into what Penpot is, I want to talk about the importance of UI and UX design in today's digital world. So UI stands for user interface and UX stands for user experience. And together they define how people interact with websites, apps, or digital products. So good UI and UX design will make things intuitive, it reduces confusion for the users, and it improves how efficiently a user completes said task on a platform. For example, if a website is hard to navigate, users are just going to leave because they don't want to take the time to figure out how the site works, even if it's valuable. Now, despite how important this is, there are major problems in the design world today. First, teams depend heavily on paid ecosystems. Tools that I'm sure you've heard of, like Adobe XD, Figma, or Canva, they all require subscriptions, and that can become pretty expensive over time, and that makes collaboration pretty difficult if everyone doesn't have it. Second, most tools are closed source. So you don't have full control over your data, your files, or your workflow, and this could ultimately be a privacy issue. And users also just have limited flexibility. And one of the biggest issues is messy handoffs between the designers and the developers. Designers create layouts visually, while developers then have to recreate this whole thing in code. And that often leads to a lot of inconsistencies from the initial design to the final product, miscommunication between the designers and the developers, and just a lot of wasted time. So overall, the current workflow is not super efficient, but for us, Penpot changes that. So what is Penpot? Penpot is an open source design and prototyping tool built specifically for UI UX design. But what makes it really different is the way that it's been built. First, it's open source, which means that anyone can access the code, modify it, or host it themselves. And that leads to another key feature, self-hosting. Companies can run Penpot on their own servers, which gives them full control over their data and security, and that's actually what we do at Coldfront Labs. Penpot is also web-based, so it runs entirely in the browser, and you don't need to install anything. Another big facet is the fact that it uses developer-friendly formats, such as SVGs for graphics, CSS for styling, and an overall HTML-like structure. This is what allows Penpot to connect the designers and developers more effectively than traditional tools, and it heavily reduces that gap of inconsistencies. As we dive in now, Penpot has 4 key features that cover the entire design workflow. So first we have design tools such as page layouts, design systems, and font styles. Second is prototyping user flows, page interactions and transitions. Third, we have collaboration methods, including multiplayer, leaving comments, and shareability. And last is the developer handoff, a really important one that allows users to get the specs they need, the CSS and HTML or SVG markups, and this can all be acquired from the code inspection tool. So I'll go through each one of these, starting with the design tools. So Penpot includes all of the basic tools that you need to create interfaces. You can create artboards, which are just the screens for your apps or your websites. You can draw and edit vector graphics like icons and shapes. And you can add and style text, including fonts of your own or from Penpot, and then space and align them as you wish. So these are core building blocks of any UI design interface, but what makes it stronger is the advanced controls. So this includes libraries, so you can make elements and then reuse them. Also grids and guides to align elements properly and make your layouts look clean and professional. And we have flex layout and constraints, which works pretty similarly to how websites are actually built using CSS, as you can control the spacing, the alignment, and responsiveness. So one of the most important features in Penpot is the design systems. So designers have to create a bunch of elements like buttons, navigation bars, cards, the list goes on. If a designer had to recreate every single one of these every single time, it would waste so much time It would create a lot of little inconsistencies because even if the designer tried to make everything look identical, they're bound to miss something. And this just makes updates really difficult. So that's why Penpot uses something called components. A component is a reusable design element. So instead of designing your element over and over, you create it once, turn it into a component, and then you can use it over the project wherever you need. So let's look at a super basic example of how this can be done. So here we have a super simple design that I made of a button element. I simply created an oval shape using the bar at the top, inserted my text, and used whatever fonts and colors I wanted. And then I named it button. Then when I right-click, we get this drop-down menu, and at the very bottom you see something called Create Component. So once I click that, we have now easily created, sorry, one second. Yep. This has now turned into a component, and the selection becomes purple with a little diamond at the top to identify that to whoever's using it. Now this becomes part of your assets library, and this component can be reused with this exact same styling anywhere in your project. But we don't have to stop there. If you right-click on the button again, which has now turned into a component, we get a new item in our drop-down called Create Variant. And Create Variant is exactly what it sounds like. When we create buttons, we need them in different states, like default, hover, or disabled. So by clicking this option, we have now easily created a duplicate without having to redo any work. So then I can go into the left, rename it hover, so then I know that I'm redesigning this button for the hover state, which I have done here. And you can see the default and hover states grouped as button components. So when working on a real project, this is a really clean and easy way to make all of those states that you need. And once again, they'll show up in your assets library. And you can repeat the same process for just about any element that you make on a page, like a drop-down menu, search bar, the list goes on. Not only can it be reused for this Penpot project, but if I were to export my library, then I can import it into any other project as well. So next I'll move on to flex layouts. A flex layout is best used when items go in one direction only, so either horizontally from left to right or vertically from top to bottom. So think of these items like a row of buttons in a menu, or a vertical menu on a phone, stacked cards, or a navigation bar. So let's take another example. Imagine, or as I've done here, 3 buttons, home, about, and contact. Without Flex, I've manually placed all of these buttons and moved them on the page. They're clearly not aligned very well, but even if I were to go in and take the time to make sure everything is aligned perfectly, if later on I wanted to resize it, then everything that I did manually would just break, so it's just not efficient. But with Flex, Penpot automatically spaces them evenly, and if you resize the frame, it will still stay organized. So if I select all of my buttons and I right-click, there is an option that it gives me called Add Flex Layout. And when I click that, my buttons have now automatically lined up vertically. A cool thing about Penpot is that the Flex will try to first guess what your layout is going to be based on your initial placements. So we can see in the layout properties that Penpot has decided on column reverse as my default. Of course, these properties are interchangeable, so say I actually wanted these buttons to be lined up horizontally. Right here, I can click row and we can see that they are now all in a row. But now I don't like that the buttons are all touching each other, so let's fix that too. In column gap, I've changed the number from 0 to 24 to create better spacing between the buttons, and it looks a lot cleaner now. There are also padding option controls right underneath the gap, but I'm going to leave those at 0. Now, if you haven't noticed already, the buttons are not in a naturally intuitive order. Normally, we see home on the left of a page and contact on the right. Now, instead of me going in and moving them around, I can also get Flex to do this for me. So if I click row reverse, now the order is correct. There are also some additional properties that can be used based entirely off of a designer's preference or project guidelines. So we've got 3 alignment options. These are our constraints. If these buttons were on a web page, I can choose to align items start at the top for something like a header, align at the center of the page, or align items at the end of a page for something like a footer. Now we'll move on to prototyping. So at the beginning of a project, designs are usually static, but in real application, users don't experience screens separately, they move through them. So designing screens alone is not always enough, and it's a good idea to prototype. First, Penpot includes an interaction system that allows designers to connect elements directly to other artboards or screens. For example, clicking a checkout button and then opening to a cart. Now there are also two triggers for interactions in Penpot, that being click and hover. The click trigger is most commonly used amongst designers for things such as clicking a menu item or clicking a login button. And hover interactions are mainly used for desktop interfaces, like buttons changing in appearance from, say, a dark purple to a light purple. So these interactions provide us with visual feedback, and that improves usability and makes the interfaces a lot more responsive and intuitive. Second, we have navigation flows. A navigation flow represents the path that a user takes in an application. So for example, imagine an e-commerce application. A user might first browse through products, then they're going to open a product page, then they'll add the item to their cart, then they'll go to checkout, and then complete their payment. So that sequence of actions becomes what we call a navigation flow, and that provides the users complete user journeys before they have to code. So if we look at this image on the left, you'll notice that some artboards have blue lines starting in one artboard and then leading into multiple different artboards. This is because web pages are never linear, as different users will follow different flows. For instance, an administrator might follow a dashboard flow while a new user would follow an onboarding flow. And third, we have transitions, which control how one screen changes into another. Some applications focus heavily on animations, but Penpot's goal is to focus on usability and practicality, which is something that I really appreciate about it. So a design can look impressive visually, but if users aren't able to understand how to navigate it, then there's literally no point because the experience fails. So the prototype is meant to answer questions like, does this flow make sense? Are users confused anywhere? And can tasks be completed easily? In fact, these questions lead to my next point. Prototype testing. Instead of waiting until an application is fully coded, designers can test ideas early on. They can identify problems and improve the experience before expensive development work actually happens. So we have a few options for this. First, you would go to preview mode, which looks like a little play button right over there. And then preview mode would allow designers and teams to interact with their prototype, almost like it's a real application. This connects to click-through testing to identify friction points. Friction happens when users become confused, they struggle to navigate through a page or complete a task. So by clicking through the prototype, teams can observe whether buttons are obvious, whether screens are organized logically, and whether the user journey feels smooth. So if users are constantly stopping to think about what to do next, you probably need to improve your design. Now let's talk about collaboration. So modern UI and UX design is rarely done by one person alone. Most real-world projects involve the designers, the developers, then also the project managers, stakeholders, and clients. So because of this, collaboration tools are super important. Penpot was designed specifically to improve the communication and teamwork throughout the design and development process. So one of the core collaboration features in Penpot is real-time editing. This means that multiple users can work on the same project at the same time. In older workflows, designers would have to send files back and forth, create multiple versions, or manually merge updates. And that's actually something that still happens in a lot of Adobe softwares. But here, as one person makes a change, everyone else sees those changes instantly. This is very similar to how collaborative tools like Google Docs works, but applied to design interface. This also connects to the live cursors, which you can see in that image down there, and it can make you aware of instances where a designer might be editing a layout, and at the same time a developer is inspecting spacing, and at the same time as that, another teammate could be reviewing typography. So that is super good for coordination. Next, there is a commenting system. Users can leave comments directly on any part of the design. For example, if they want to suggest a layout change, ask about spacing, anything like that. And this is much more effective than discussing changes separately through, say, sending emails or messaging apps, because the feedback is directly attached to the design itself. So at CoolFront, instead of having to create new issues and sending emails with screenshots and such, the person that's reviewing my work can simply go into Penpot, leave a comment directly on the part of the design they want changed, and I'll see it right away. And these can then turn into full thread discussions, and it all stays contained. And last is role inclusion. So teams can control who can view their projects, who can edit designs, who can comment, and who can inspect their code. For example, the designers focus on layouts and interactions, while developers inspect spacing or CSS properties, and the stakeholders and clients can also be included by being able to comment and give their feedback. So this is great because traditional workflows often separate the designers and the developers into different tools and processes, but with Penpot, it tries to bring everyone together into one space. And last, we have the developer handoff. So this is a stage where designs move from the design team into actual development. Developers normally have to manually interpret wireframes and designs that they receive and then rebuild everything in code. We know now why that's not very efficient. So with Penpot, developers are able to inspect the CSS values of anything in the design rather than estimating, like font sizes, colors, and layout properties. And then they can simply copy and paste the styling into their code from the inspect panel. Also, we have the SVG workflow, our scalable vector graphics. Penpot was really smart to have been built around SVG, so whatever designs that you make in Penpot are already really close to production-ready assets. And these can be exported directly into development projects without needing any conversion. So next, I'm going to move on to a live demo. Okay. So what I'm going to do today for this demo is I'm going to make a low fidelity wireframe for an iPhone. So I just took a screenshot from the Penpot landing page, and the first thing I'm going to do is grab a board here and make a rough estimate of what the screen sizing might look like. Now, if I knew the exact dimensions of an iPhone screen, I could go into design and put in the width and height myself, but I don't know what it is. So lucky for me, Penpot has size presets. So it has a bunch of screens from Apple to Android to desktop. The list goes on forever. But I'm going to pick an iPhone 16 Pro Max, and then I will rename this to landing page. Alright, so the first thing I want to do is add a logo. Because it's low fidelity, I don't have to use the actual Penpot logo. I can just use something that says logo. So here in my assets, if I had my own components, they would have shown up here, but because it's a new project, I don't have anything. But what I did do is I downloaded a library from Penpot. So in here, I have a bunch of components. I have preset colors if I wanted to use them, and preset typographies. In the components, there are a lot of options. For instance, there's avatars I can use, there's buttons and primary or secondary states, there are icons, there's headers, there's a lot really. So what I want right now is a logo, and I can find that in images, and now I can just drag and drop this into my design. Now, even though it's a component, I can still resize this the way I want by double clicking, and I'll make it more similar to the sizing of the Penpot logo that we have. Just move it. All right, I'm happy with that. So the next thing I'm going to do is put in our title text. So what I could do is hit text here, make a text box, type what I want, and then change the properties on the side, but because I have components, there's no point in wasting time doing that. Instead, I can go down to text, and I already have some presets available for me. So I'm going to pick the title text and drop that in here, double click, that's me, and I will type in our title. Oops. And I can change the width, and then instead of, again, going into the properties and changing the number manually, I can simply hit a K shortcut, and then I can scale this way as big as I want it to be. So I think this is pretty similar. I'll center it, hit K again. Fix that. Maybe it's a bit too big. Scale it down again. There we go. I'll put that right here. All right, so now we have our title. Now I want to put in my body text. Now again, because this is low fidelity, I don't have to go in and type in that whole sentence. I can just pick my line of text and keep whatever's already in there. And the same way as I did for the title, I'm gonna hit K and scale this. And then I can also double click and center it. So now our text is done. Next thing I want to do is add some buttons. So I can go to my components, find buttons, and the first one I'm going to do is in a primary state. This looks the closest, so I'll pick this one. And again, I can still edit this even though it's a component. I can double click, change the text. Oh, I forgot to hit K. 1 second. Now you can see in our example, the button looks a bit more like a square, so I can hit the actual shape of the button. 1 second. Scale that up, and then, don't want to stay. Okay. It's scaled up now, and then it also, I can go into the radius, scale this down to about 10, and now it looks a lot more similar to the original. And I'm going to do the same thing for the second button in a secondary state. And I'll be following the exact same steps. I should have brought a mouse. Okay. All of this, okay. Does it want to work? There we go. Okay, self-host install. And I can make this more of a square again, scale the radius down to 10, and I want to make sure that they are the same size, so I can just line them up and do so. Now if I had these made as a component myself, I wouldn't have to do this, but it is a preset library, and that's why I have to do it myself. Leave that there. Okay. The next thing I want to do is we'll consider this bottom part an image. So I want to get an image. I can go to here and just click a square, drag and drop that where I want it to be, and size it. And the last thing I need is this menu icon over here. So I could go to icons, but the problem with this component library is that it doesn't have the menu icon. So an easy thing you can do is go to Google Fonts and pick the color sizing you want and just copy and paste this into Penpot, scale it down a lot. Say roughly there. And then I'm going to need this icon again. So I can now go in and turn this into a component for my own library. So I right click, hit create component, and now if I scroll up into my local library, we have a component now, and I can rename this to menu logo. So now this will show up anywhere else I need it, and it will be in that exact size as well. So now our landing page is done, but I want to see what it looks like when the menu actually opens up. So to do that, I deleted it. Well, we'll do it from scratch. We are going to make a menu. So it'll be the same height. And for scaling purposes, I'm quickly going to change the color so I can see how big I want the menu to look when it comes out from the side, because that's how I want it to be. So I think I like that. I'm going to leave that. I'll bring it back and change it back to white. And I will also rename this to menu. Okay, so we'll just do a quick little menu. I'm going to go into text and grab some body text, and I'll call this product. Disappeared. Let's try that again. Okay. There we go. So product, that'll be our section title. Then I'm going to grab a few link texts and just give it some random names for the menu. We will call this one design, and I'll repeat this about, say, 3 times. So do another one called code. Last one called, let's say, about. Okay, so these are obviously not lined up very well, and I honestly don't want to go in and look at these little squares that appear to make sure that they are equally spaced. So what I can do is I grab all of these, I right click, and I hit add flex layout, and now they're all lined up evenly. And now for the purpose of the demo, I'm just going to group these and then copy and paste them all the way down. And these will be all of our menu items. And now I can do the same thing here. These are probably not spaced out evenly, so I can grab all of these. I can right click and hit add flex layout, and they should be lined up evenly now. The last thing I'll do is just put in a little close icon over here. So here is my menu. Now I want to see what it looks like if it were to slide in and out, like an actual prototype. So to do this, I'm going to be interacting with the menu icon and the X icon. So first thing I'll do is I'll hit this menu icon, go to prototype, and hit add interaction. So this is the preset that it gives us. Trigger is on click. We're going to keep that because we want it to open when it clicks. Then our action is to to open overlay. And our destination is the menu down here. Now, relative to does not matter because I'm going to be positioning the menu manually. So this pops up, and now I can choose exactly where I want it to pop up once my transition happens. Then I'll also check close when clicking outside and add a background overlay. So when the menu opens, the landing page will gray a little bit. Then for animation, I'm going to hit slide. I want it to come in from the right. We'll leave the duration as 300 milliseconds and the easing is linear. So that first animation is done. Now I also want it to be able to close when I hit the X. So I'll hit the X icon, add another interaction. Trigger is still on click. My action is going to be to close the overlay. The destination is on itself, and the animation is a slide again, but from the left, and we'll leave the duration and easing the same. So now you can see a little play button has appeared here. If I click it, it'll open up my prototype, and if I hit the menu, it should open up my menu, and if I hit the X, it should close. Or if I hit outside of it, it should also close. And a few other things I want to show you guys are the comment options. So say a client comes in, they see this, they don't like the size of my button. So they can go here, anywhere they want, they can say change button size. They can comment this and I will immediately see it. Then I can reply to them, I can add at them, or I can see this and then make the change that I need to make and then hit this check and it grays out so I know that I've completed this task now. Then the last thing is you can hit this inspect mode. So anything on this page, you can see the properties in the info, or you can hit code and you'll see all the CSS properties and the HTML and SVG, whatever you need, and copy and paste it into your code. So thank you for coming. Does anybody have questions? Yeah, go ahead.
So I have a lot of experience with Figma.
Okay.
And before that, Adobe XD. And I'm really wondering if Penpot, like it looks almost exactly the same as Figma to me. But I'm wondering if it improves on specifically things that I find cumbersome in Figma, and if it does a better job. If the UX is better, or if it's just, this is kind of like an open source version of Figma, and it's going to have the same annoyances that I find using. Like one of the things I find really annoying in Figma is, like you have your color library, but actually applying those colors is really cumbersome. So then the designer doesn't do it, and the developer gets a hex code again, and not the nice named version of the color. So you're like, okay, which orange is this?
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if Penpot improves on that UX at all, or if it's just kind of like, this is open source Figma. And it's
It is pretty much just open source Figma, but I would say when it comes to like the libraries and such, they're a lot simpler to use.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't get any confusions with the hex coding or anything. So
yeah, like if you're applying color, is it easy to choose it from the library?
Yeah,
Is it
super
using
easy.
eyedropper and grabbing it? And
yeah, exactly. You don't have to do that. You can literally, when you make your palette, it kind of looks like the ones that, like if you were to go onto like Adobe Color Palette and it makes like a pretty little thing for you. So it does that, and you can just drag and drop or just click it and it's already named. You don't have to actually use any sort of dropper.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, no, the dropper gets the hex value in Figma. Which
Yeah.
is bad. You don't want that. But the menus for accessing the library are just cumbersome to access. So designers often stop doing that.
Yeah. No, it's actually, I don't have colors preset
Yeah.
here, but if I did,
It's
they would
on the
just show up here. Like,
Yeah, and then you can just grab the color. See, that's
and
what
they're
I
just
do
there.
with
And you can even make
yeah.
them like bigger or smaller, but it's, yeah, they're super easy to grab.
Yeah,
I would say it's better than Figma in that sense.
Yeah, like if it's on the left there, like Figmas are kind of buried.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, it's not like that.
Nice. I'll have to give it a try.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things I've done with clients is share designs on GitLab.
Mm-hmm.
And they have the ability to add comments, and then we can have kind of a discussion thread going. But then when I update the design, those previous comments just kind of get archived with the previous design. I'm curious about the comments with Penpot. Like when you're iterating through the design, what happens to the comments and the comment threads that were added to kind of a previous version?
So that's entirely up to whoever's working on it. So if I had a bunch of comments that were left here and I changed the design, they would still be exactly where they were, even if you change your design. I can go in and archive them if they're bothering me, but other than that, they're going to stay exactly where they were. They don't disappear.
Great, okay, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a developer gripe question.
Mm-hmm.
So as someone who implements designs, when I get a pixel size for font, it bothers me because we don't use pixels
Yeah.
for font sizes anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell this to use like relative units?
So
Or are you stuck with pixels still?
I don't know the certain answer to that, but I am assuming because it is open source that you can go in and change that. But yeah, by default it is pixels.
Okay.
Well, if that's it then, thank you.